Welcome, World Series of Fighting fans, to the inaugural episode of This Week in WSOF. The goal of this show is to take a look at the past week and catch all fans of the World Series of Fighting up on all the happenings in the promotion. I am your co-host, John Franklin of the Combat Press. I am joined by fellow Combat Press writer and WSOF.com contributor, Kyle Sims. Kyle, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So let's get this party started. With respect to World Series of Fighting 29, I did a post-fight show with Nick Peralta, who was on location. I wanted to, because you and I did a pre-fight show with Nick, I wanted to get your thoughts on World Series of Fighting 29 just from like 30,000 feet. What'd you think of the card and what stuck out to you?
Definitely the Lewis-Taylor fight. That one was pretty crazy, where he pretty much just choked him out, and I think it was like 30 seconds or something like that. He's a local guy from Chicago, so always got to root for them. I was a little disappointed, I have to be honest, in the main event, only because it was so short. I was kind of hoping for a 5-round, Gaethje Palomino type thing. But, I'll take a finish, of course, in a championship fight. Everyone likes that. And I was actually really surprised with the heavyweights, with how they were, because you didn't, turn into a slogging affair. There's actually some nice, technical combinations going on in that fight that I was actually really surprised about.
Yeah, those guys looked a lot better than you would have thought going in. I think I talked to Nick about that a little bit. Copeland, I suggested he fight Derek Maiman. That could be a legit fight. I'm with you. I was surprised by the heavyweights as well. But here's my question: in terms of the main event, and we'll get to the suspensions, which were kind of a little crazy here in a second. But in terms of the main event, Foster pushed the action, but ultimately it was a fast fight. But he did well for himself. So my question for you is, it's probably not going to be the next fight, and we'll get to what the next fight is, but do you think Foster showed himself well enough that he could be like one fight, or maybe, could get a rematch?
Oh, definitely. Without a question, that guy deserves a rematch. He was landing some pretty good shots early, and you can't really say that without a shadow of a doubt that Gaethje's the better fighter just because he won based on a couple of leg kicks in the first round. The guy went through 3 tough fights just to get there. And, he was doing pretty well in the opening rounds. That had the makings of a huge fight going for 5 rounds, back and forth action. So I think maybe one more fight just to have him get a win so you don't have to push him back into a title fight off a loss, because I don't like when promotions do that. But definitely one more fight, let him get a win, let him get some mic time afterwards, call out Gaethje, and run it again.
I agree. I think those guys are it's weird. I do think that they fight so in a way that it's always going to be short, I think. So it'll never be Palomino Gaethje, which was great. Everybody got sick of Gaethje Palomino, which I understand. Gaethje, of course, did. I just don't think that Brian Foster and Justin Gaethje will ever be that, but it's still a compelling fight. Now, let's get to the suspensions. Gaethje, let's get to his second, because it's kind of a unique suspension. But Foster was suspended based on the injury. So what's the latest you've heard? I thought last thing I heard they were doing an MRI. Obviously, there's some damage to the knee. Do you know anything about Foster's timetable? Because I don't know 100%.
Yeah, the last time I heard was that he was in the hospital waiting for an MRI. They thought maybe it was a torn ACL just from the nature of the injury, from how he, collapsed down in pain and was grabbing his knee. I haven't heard one thing one way or the other. We've been trying to follow up on it and see if we can do some additional stories on that. But outside of just waiting for the MRI results and seeing what the actual damage was, that's as far as I know.
All right, so now let's get to the other suspension. Justin Gaethje was suspended by the Colorado State Athletic Commission for his backflip. Now, obviously, the full disclosure of this suspension is that they had told him previous to the fight that they didn't want him to do it, and he did it anyway. So, and then obviously the suspension went away the next day or the day after. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that was a rough after-school detention for him, pretty much. I saw somebody called it on Twitter. Can't remember who, but I'll give him credit once I figure it out. On one hand, I understand where the commission's coming from. They did warn him not to do it. He did it anyways. There should be a punishment. I don't think they really had to come out and suspend him. If you want to fine him, give him a slap on the wrist, then that's totally justified, in my opinion, because they warned him not to do it. He did it anyways. There's always going to have to be a punishment to an action. But I mean, it got to be a little bit ridiculous. But hey, it gave us something else to talk about on Monday.
That's true, and I guess for me the problem, and I tweeted this, was that I had a problem with the fact that they let a 68-year-old woman fight, and they're busting this kid's balls about backflips. So you know that's a problem for me. So I obviously they've lost a little bit of credibility out in the world, more so than Justin Gaethje did. I think the kid should stop doing backflips off top of the cage. But that's neither here nor there. Not because they told him not to, because you know it's dangerous. But you know, you're Justin Gaethje. That's just who you are. You know, and it's what makes him marketable. It's what you know is part of who he is, and God bless him for it. So let's spin this forward a little bit. In the cage, he called out Jason High. What are your thoughts on that fight? Because when the rankings came out, it was Firmino, Foster at 2, and then High at 3. And with Ray Sefo doing these rankings, sometimes I wonder, you know, is he trying to send messages with these rankings, or what sort of the motivation is behind them? What are you thinking is next for Gaethje?
Well, I will have to say that I think the Jason High fight is going to be next. The two kind of went after each other a little bit on Twitter after the fight, so they've already got the social media campaigns going against one another. Gaethje told me leading up to the fight that if he won, he was going to call out Jason High, so he went through on that. He's obviously – that's a guy on his list that he wants to fight. I don't have a problem with it. I think it's a perfect matchup for Gaethje and High, according, you know, talent level, about where they're on the same plane at least. To be honest, I don't have any desire to see Firmino in the title fight, just because nothing against the guy personally. I don't know him personally or anything, but his fighting style is just not for me. I can appreciate that he's a very good grappler and he's obviously a well-experienced fighter, but it's just not my cup of tea. So if I had to choose between those two, given that Foster's probably going to be out for a while, I'd go with Jason High, just simply for the fact that it's an easier sell.
I will struggle with using the term, let me play devil's advocate here, because I hate it. But let me ask you this. Mm-hmm. Could you make a case? There's two cases against Jason High, and I'll make them both right now. Number one is that if you're Ray Sefo, and we'll get to the free agency talk here in a second. I'm actually going to bump that up in our rundown, but we'll get to that in a second. But if you're Ray Sefo, on some level, do you sort of think, and this is some conspiracy theory stuff I'm throwing at you here, but do you think that Jason High has fought Rafael dos Anjos before? Do you think that if Justin Gaethje fought Jason High and beat him more impressively than Rafael dos Anjos had, do you think that starts to get Gaethje's wheels turning as to maybe I should split and go to the UFC?
I honestly don't. I think he's pretty much has his mind set already on what he wants to do as far as the free agency talk goes. He's pretty much come out and said he's not going to take less money to go somewhere else. So it's going to be kind of negotiations as far as how that goes. If anything, I'm sure he's going to want to test his market worth and see what he's worth out there in terms of, you know, Bellator, UFC, maybe ONE FC. I know they've thrown their hat in the ring for a couple of recent free agencies. So maybe that starts to get his mind going as far as, hey, Jason High is a credible name. I just beat him, you know, show me the money, for a lack of a better term. But I think he's already got his mind set up. Just hearing, so I mean, he's already got his mind set up one way or the other. I don't think the Jason High fight's going to push him over the edge one way or the other.
All right, so let me give you the other argument against Jason High. Luis Firmino, like you said, he's a very good grappler. He's proficient on the hands. He's kind of a poor man's Rafael dos Anjos to an extent. Mm-hmm. Do you think that he would be a better matchup for Justin Gaethje? Obviously, it wouldn't get the fans' interest. Justin Gaethje is a little bit like the World Series of Fighting's Conor McGregor. He's going to sell no matter who he fights. You don't really need to put a guy in there who's going to help him sell a fight necessarily. They'll just put it in the right spot. It'll be in Arizona. In this case, it was in Colorado. I mean, people come out for Gaethje. So do you think Firmino is a better matchup in terms of maybe beating Justin Gaethje than Jason High?
You know, it's tough to say. On one hand, like we've said, Firmino's a pretty strong grappler. That's obviously his focus. So, I mean, if he's coming into the fight, everyone knows what he's going to do. But on the other hand, Gaethje's a Division I All-American. You know, he's used to stuffing shots like every every day or all the time. So I mean, that plays right into his wheelhouse of I'm going to make you stop. I'm going to stop your takedowns, and then I'm going to hit you in the face 5 times and make you pay for it. So on one hand, I mean, I guess just because Gaethje likes to come forward, and that could leave him open to a takedown and being held on the ground. We've seen him taken down before by other people. So maybe you look at Firmino as a tougher option just because he's so good at one particular thing. But at the same time, I don't know. It's just not going to be an exciting fight unless Gaethje goes in there and destroys him in 1 round. Like, I could just see this turning into a wall-installed split decision, and I'm going to have nightmares over it.
I do agree with that. I just think that sometimes promotions will hold off a fight sometimes because they know it's just always in their back pocket. And I don't know if they would say, well, if we have him fight high, will anyone care about Firmino? And if we have him fight Firmino, maybe they'll still care about high, or I don't know, like order-wise. I don't know. So it's all a matter, like you said, of and here's one thing I'll give Justin Gaethje credit for that doesn't get talked about a lot. He very much could play the George St. Pierre game of taking people down and grinding them out and having that. The kid puts himself in harm's way. I mean, he puts himself out there and puts himself at risk. He trusts his chin. He believes that getting hit on the forehead is different than getting hit on the chin or the temple, which everyone that is a former fighter disagrees with. But hey, it's part of one of those things where if you are part of it's like a placebo effect. If he believes it's true, it's true. It's the old Bull Durham thing. If the guy thinks he's getting hits because he's, washing his socks or not washing his socks, that's why. So if that works for Justin Gaethje, that works for him. But so credit to him there. Now let's sort of transition to the free agency talk because you touched on it a little bit. Marlon Moraes, Justin Gaethje seem to be the 2 guys who are the 3 main guys who are carrying the World Series of Fighting flag with David Branch. They are the guys who are closest to free agency, and they are the guys who have talked about testing free agency waters. What do you think about each of them individually? They're both represented by the same person, Ali Abdelaziz, who is a former executive with World Series of Fighting. How do you see their free agency?
So we'll start with Marlon first. I know he's talked about wanting to fight a couple big names, like when Aljamain Sterling was a free agent. He was very much trying to get the World Series of Fighting to sign him just so he could fight, a top 5 guy because he's been wanting to prove himself against the best. He's one of those people who, he likes making money and fighting, of course, but he wants to fight the best. That's his thing, is he wants to prove himself against the best in the world. So there's a situation where, if he runs out of contenders, of course he's going to, I think everyone owes it to themselves to check out their market worth when their contract runs out if they choose not to re-sign, just because that's a good business practice, honestly. But the thing is, and for all 3 of these, actually, it's what do you make in the World Series of Fighting and what are you going to get offered by somebody else? Because I can guarantee you that some of these guys, what they're making in World Series of Fighting, they're not going to get that much if they go to a different organization. Like, it's not going to be on the same level as what they do now, just in disclosed salary. That's not even counting the money you're going to be losing from sponsors, because everybody knows the Reebok deal with the UFC. If you go there, I mean, that's a huge chunk of your income that you're just forfeiting. And I don't really foresee them getting a contract that offsets that loss of sponsorship dollars. As far as David Branch, I mean, he just re-signed, I think. So I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. He's obviously 2 division champions. So if he does go, that's going to leave a pretty big hole, if he goes down the line. And then Gaethje, same thing with Moraes. He's talked about wanting to see what he's worth on the open market, but another case of I don't think he's going to necessarily find what he's looking for in terms of a final dollar amount. But, I mean, same thing with him. He wants to fight the best in the world, of course. When you're champion, you always want to be able to fight off tough contenders. But like he said, he's not going to take less money to go elsewhere. What do you think about it, though?
I agree. I think that, the elephant in the room is that Ali Abdelaziz was the manager of them while he was working with the World Series of Fighting, and that may have something to do with what their contracts are. Listen, I don't know if that's the case. At the end of the day, I really don't care. It's somebody else's money. But what I will say is, if that's the case, whether it's the case or not doesn't matter. If their money, like you said, is based on that contingency at the time, then you're absolutely right. They're not going to see that on the free market, and they won't see it whether that's the case or not. But the point is that if you're them, it does make more sense to be A, better compensated in the World Series of Fighting, and B, a bigger fish in a smaller pond. So one of the things that I've always talked about with Gaethje's pending free agency or his desire to leave is, you can't. It's hard to replace the idea that when you walk into an event, you're the guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's not going to be the guy in the UFC. He's just not. And
he's going to be a guy.
He's going to be a guy, right? And when he walks into any event at the World Series of Fighting, doesn't matter who's fighting, they go, there's the champ, there's the guy right there. He's the guy in the World Series of Fighting right now. It doesn't matter who's in the ring. And so that's a big deal, And I think the same thing can be said about Marlon Moraes. These guys don't promote themselves in a way that supersedes the promotion that they're in. They're not somebody that wherever they go, they need not a little bit of help from the promotion, but, like you said, they'll just be a guy in the World Series of Fighting. They'll be very talented. They'll be great fighters no matter where they go. But, look at Eddie Alvarez in Bellator and Eddie Alvarez in the UFC. He was a big deal in Bellator, and he's becoming a bigger deal in the UFC. But he'll never be in the UFC when he was in Bellator. It'll never happen.
And look how long it took him to get to that point from when he came over to Bellator. I mean, I'm sure sitting on the sidelines for a good time probably hurt his chances of coming in and wrecking shop like he used to. But at the same time, it took him a while to get back up to that top of the rankings.
Absolutely. And he's not going into a UFC that has a division. He's not going into Demetrius Johnson's division or even Dominic Cruz's division for that matter. He's going into a division with, 15 studs who all have personality. You tell me that you're going to go into the 155-pound division and be marketable or more interesting than Anthony Pettis? Like, what do you bring? And Anthony Pettis is on tough times now. So it's like, that's what you're staring at. Are you going to be, more compelling? Anthony Pettis on a Wheaties box. Anthony Pettis is a good-looking kid with personality who does Showtime kicks. So, right. That's my point. So I think that they're best served in staying where they are now, and I think that says nothing to who they are as fighters. They can continue to just wreck guys and do their thing and do what makes the most sense for them financially, and especially at their age. They're both young guys. I say you make a couple of dollars for the next couple of years, and then when you're 30, go to the UFC. Try it out then. They're both like 26, 27. Give it 3 more years, see what happens with the World Series of Fighting, and then go from there. All right.
Definitely.
So moving on down the line, something that I'm actually going to be a part of this weekend is the Your Fight event Sunday at Celebrity Theater here in Phoenix. I will first say, and I wrote about this, the first 3 sentences I wrote about it were that everyone thought this was a hoax when it first happened, because just the logistics of it. You're telling me Ken Shamrock, who hasn't fought Royce Gracie yet, is going to be in a main event against Dan Severn. And you're telling me Michael Bisping, who hasn't fought Anderson Silva yet, is going to be fighting or grappling Chael Sonnen. It just didn't make sense. Why is Roy Jones going to fight a fan? Like, the whole thing just seemed insane. Well, it is true. It's going down. I got my press credential today, so I know it's legit. So I'm either going to be kidnapped and taken to parts unknown, or I'm going to watch a crazy night of fighting. So one of the people that is obviously affiliated with World Series of Fighting is Chael Sonnen. He's grappling Michael Bisping on that card. Let me get your thoughts on that, and then I have another interesting question for you after that.
Let me just ask you a quick question about that first. Since you're covering it, do you know about the rules at all for the grappling, like how it's going to be scored? Is it going to be like the Metamoris event where it's 30 minutes and you're only winning by tap out, or it's going to a draw? I haven't seen anything about it.
I haven't seen anything about it either, and they haven't. All they've released is just sort of like a to-do list of like, hey, this is where the weigh-ins are, and this is where the. I think they're kind of keeping it close to the vest in case night of there's any, like Bisping doesn't want to do this or Chael doesn't want to do that. They have some leeway. So I haven't heard anything about the scoring. But what do you think about the idea that those two are even grappling each other?
I like it. I mean, they've already fought, so they have a history. They're both pretty good talkers, so, I mean, I wish they would have been able to promote this a little bit more using both of their personalities than what we've seen. But, I mean, Bisping, he's always entertaining. I think it'll be interesting to see how Bisping does grappling, because we've never really seen him in a lot of grappling exchanges. You're used to seeing him doing his little pit-pat punching combinations that I'm sure hurt a lot, but they don't look like they hurt a lot. But then whereas we've seen Chael, grappling, that's his thing. That's his world. He, is a very successful grappler in terms of wrestling. And I think he held his own when he did the Metamoris events. I mean, yeah, you could tell he wasn't on the same level as the guys he was going against in terms of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu skills. But, I mean, for a wrestler with very little submission wrestling training, I think he did pretty damn well.
Well, and for a wrestler who has a propensity to get submitted, he did pretty well. And let's not forget, I think he had a draw with Galvao in Metamoris, choked out Shogun, which to this day I'll never figure out how that happened, but did it. And the only fight between him and Bisping was kind of a grappling contest, and Chael out-grappled him. The thing that I thought that I wrote in my piece that was compelling was that was Chael as an active fighter and Bisping as a younger fighter. Now this is Bisping coming off having just fought Anderson Silva and doing all the training for that, and Chael's a couple years removed. So I wonder if maybe Bisping's closed the gap grappling wise.
I just don't understand how he could go from the type of fight that he had with Anderson to doing a hard grappling match. Like, I just don't see how he's physically capable of doing it. I know he keeps himself in great shape, and cardio has never been an issue with him, but just even from being knocked out, because, I mean, let's call a spade a spade. He was knocked out at the end of that round when Anderson hit him with the flying knee. I don't care what he says. The lights went out even if it went for a second. They were out. And then all the, the actual scar tissue damage, taking punches and kicks from Anderson Silva isn't exactly a walk in the park. And he's only having, a couple of weeks to go and be able to rest up and then get some grappling training in. Because he wasn't only doing just grappling and leading up to Anderson Silva. So it's not like he's been doing nonstop wrestling drills for the past couple months. So I will be interested to see, depending on how long the rounds are or how they do it, to see how he holds up, against Chael, who, is going to be pretty much a freight train coming forward.
Yeah, and like you said, he was knocked out, and had the referee stopped in there and waved it off, no one would have said a thing. Even though it was stopped by if he would have just stepped in, like if he was faster, if he was more on top of it, Bisping dropped and he just waved it off, everybody would have been fine with it. So he was knocked out. Now, my thing that I find interesting is that, and like you said, he was training for Anderson Silva. So say all you want about grappling, you're training to make sure you don't get your head knocked off. If you fight Anderson Silva between now and the day that Anderson Silva dies, I don't care if you're fighting a 65-year-old Anderson Silva, you're concerned about him knocking your head off. So that's what Bisping was concerned about. So you're right. He couldn't have got that much grappling training in. Now, I want to spin this forward in an interesting way. Chael has knocked around the idea of coming back and fighting. What would you think about Chael entering the World Series of Fighting and fighting David Branch at 185 pounds?
I think that would be a perfect fight to put on NBC. I know they've only done one event so far on actual NBC network television, but if you can get Branch, who you've kind of seen now that they give him a microphone, he's got everyone knows he's got a personality. He's not a boring person by any stretch of the word. And you have Chael. I mean, what more could you ask for to draw viewers in between getting those two personalities? And you add a title match to the mix. Like, that's just icing on top of the cake for me.
And you know what? And the cool thing about David Branch is, one, he's really smart, and two, he plays ball. And what I mean by play ball is, if you want to have an intense stare down with David Branch, he'll have an intense stare down with you. If you want to get in an interview with David Branch, try and bust his balls, he'll go back and forth with you. Like, he's that malleable as a promotable guy that you can't take him into a world he's uncomfortable in, I don't think. So I think that could be, listen, I'm just going to throw this out there, but, David Branch and Chael Sonnen with Gaethje Foster as the undercard ain't too bad for NBC, and then you start to piece these guys together, so if you got, now the only thing that's the problem there is that you'd probably have to go out and sign a guy that's 205 pounds, because I think maybe the third fight down the road being, Vinny Magalhães, and, you have to get somebody, because obviously the champ is Branch. So unless they really want to draw some eyes and have Branch fight Chael Sonnen and Vinny Magalhães in the same night, then
fight them at the same time. Just get it.
Yeah, why not? And as you put the belts, hang the belts from the ceiling and put a ladder in the middle.
Yeah, why not?
All right, so let's talk about another guy who once upon a time had a belt in the World Series of Fighting. His name is Rousimar Palhares. He has come out this week and said that, I don't care who's fighting for the 170-pound belt. I am the 170-pound champion. I am the best welterweight fighter in the World Series of Fighting. I want to get your take both on that statement in terms of its validity, and also the fact that he made it.
So I'm not surprised at all he made that statement. If you've heard Rousimar Palhares talk, that sounds exactly like something he would say when asked a question like that. As far as the validity to it, On one hand, he did something to get suspended and therefore lost his belt. So it is his own fault that he is not a title holder anymore. I don't really see the same. I mean, on the same hand, whereas I see like John Jones being the actual UFC light heavyweight champion and not Daniel Cormier, I kind of feel like it's kind of the same situation, and that Paul Harris didn't lose in the cage. It's kind of like the thing where, if a starter loses their spot because of injury, they didn't really lose it. The other guy didn't beat them out. They just happened to be on the sidelines. So I understand where he's coming from, and I definitely think he has a right to argue that point, because if you're going to compare the two, then, yeah, I mean, you could definitely say he's – I don't know about best 170er, depending on who you want to talk to, because Jake Shields was doing pretty damn good in that fight until what happened. So, I mean, if you want to argue between those two, 1A, 1B, that's fine. And as far as being the real champion, I agree with him on that.
I think the part that sucks the most about this for me is that he is a stud, and and that's something the World Series of Fighting needs. They're in a position now where, and I'm not acting like they're, it's the Titanic at all. They're doing well. They're having some good cards, but it's still all hands on deck. You can't have guys taking a time off. You wouldn't want to lose somebody to injury for months and months and months. This is kind of what we're dealing with here. This guy is unnecessarily not fighting for an unnecessary reason. So that's the part that kind of sucks about it from the perspective of being a fan of the World Series of Fighting. So you're right. I mean, obviously he made a case for himself in being the true 170-pound champion, but in the same thing in John Jones's case, you can say it all you want. If you did something to get the belt stripped, then all you're doing is talking, and you're the reason why it got stripped. Then that's where we are. So I agree with you talent-wise and in the cage-wise. It's like, when these college basketball teams get sanctioned, you can't take away their, when they went into the Final Four, a bunch of teams got their ass kicked and they won. So you can't take that away. Those guys don't feel any better because you took away their title.
Right.
Believe me, they knew they got their ass kicked in '92 or whatever. So, but I think it's a little bit like that. But yeah, I wish that he would. I don't understand why it's so important for him to hold on to these chokes and submissions the way he does. I get it. But, I think submitting someone is enough of a message. I don't think you need to take it to the next level.
Yeah, I mean, I never understood that with him at all. There were a couple cases where the referee, maybe didn't touch him at first and touch the other guy. And I honestly, I don't have a reason to make up for excuse for him. But I mean, I understand it to a point where you need to hold on and make sure the referee sees the tap and the fight is actually over. But on the other hand, he clearly went out of his way to crank the shit out of some of those submission holds. I mean, and it's not like if you hold on to a rear naked choke for a couple extra seconds, the person's already out. I mean, I'm sure there's brain damage that would be caused by it, of course, if you held on for it for too long. But I mean, if you just crank on a key lock for an extra couple seconds, that dude's having shoulder surgery. He's out for a couple months. So, I mean, it's not something to necessarily play around with.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like someone who I can't explain the guy, because it seems like someone who Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is such a part of his life, he would respect it more and would understand the consequences of what he does. And I think that he just uses it as a way to kind of stick it up somebody's ass, and I don't. All right, let's talk about – we'll touch real quick on the rankings. There wasn't a lot of rankings this week. I think the only one that really came out was the lightweight one. We talked about that earlier. Are you comfortable with what we're looking at lightweight-wise? So what we got is, off the top of my head, it's Firmino, Foster, High. Who's 4? 5 I know is Zeffirino.
Yeah, 4 is Ricci.
So are you comfortable with that? Do you think, the 55-pound division is the most stacked division in World Series of Fighting. Are you comfortable with that? Should Foster fall more? Should High be 1? Is that how you would have seen it?
I mean, I think you could make a case for switching Foster or High just based on the fact that Foster did actually lose. So, I mean, I could see switching those two around. Ricci, I'm okay with, because he was looking pretty good up until the injury caused him to drop out of the tournament. And then he was supposed to fight Fodor earlier, I think in January, and then he had another injury to where he couldn't fight then. So I'm going to be interested to see what he looks like when he finally comes back, and see how healthy he's at his compared to all the injuries he's gone through. I think the last one was a hip injury, so that could be pretty detrimental if it's not healed all the way. I don't honestly understand Firmino being at 1 just based on the fact that he won a short notice fight. I give him credit for winning a short notice fight, but it was against Fodor, who's not even ranked in the top 5, according to them. So I don't understand where he got skyrocketed up. And I'm not trying to pick on him. I'm asking a question.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that we kind of don't know when Carlos Fodor signed, I think that we had good feelings about him, thinking that, okay, here's a guy that's coming in with some high level skills. And then I don't think that he's really that's not translated yet in the cage. So to think that, like you said, beating Carlos Fodor would make you the number 1 lightweight in the world, or the number 1 contender to the lightweight belt at 55. I'm speaking the same thing over and over again. To make you the number 1 contender for the lightweight belt based on just beating Carlos Fodor, I don't think it doesn't make sense to me. So I agree with you on that. But as far as that, and then Zeferino's fighting for the 70 belt. So who knows? It's kind of a little bit. I understand that he's earned that spot at 55, and we got, their promotion, and I respect this. When your roster is what it is, you got to move guys around. I've advocated that Marlon Moraes should fight Lance Palmer if they could both make 140. So you got to move things around to make compelling fights. So
you wouldn't even have to fight at 140 because Moraes has said that he'll fight at 45 or 55. So screw it, just have him fight then at 45. Unless they want to argue about the weight, but I don't see him being that type of guy. Where he'd just be, he'd pull up McGregor and say, "Oh no, I'll fight you at your weight class. Don't worry."
Yeah, well, here's the only thing that I think would be the catch with that is that if you're the World Series fighting with Marlon Moraes, the idea would be why just not fight the 45-pound champ? Like, why would you fight Palmer? But the reason you fight Palmer is because it's a more interesting fight. People would rather watch Palmer fight Moraes than they would rather watch him fight Almeida. So, I don't know. For me, I think that I just want to see Palmer fight Moraes. That's it. I don't really think that Palmer lost the belt. I see the argument. I was there. I didn't think he lost, but I just want to see those 2 guys fight. All right. So you are the guy who is in charge of the embedded column for WorldSeriesOfFighting.com. So tell me, and this is kind of putting you on the spot a little bit, so if you don't have something right away, we'll figure it out. But what was the most compelling thing that you saw World Series of Fighting wise on social media?
So lucky for you, I have that post pulled up. I did a little bit of my homework here. I think without question, the picture of Foster, I'm looking at it right now, of him on the stretcher, and I think it looks like the hotel or wherever they were at, or the arena they were at. That's a pretty moving image with him hugging, I believe it's his son. I don't know. I think it's his wife is the woman. I don't know his family personally, so I couldn't say one way or the other. But that image is a pretty powerful one. We also had some images in the photo gallery from the fights with I think it was Ryan Loco was doing our pictures for that night, and he got some pretty good photographs of Foster immediately after on the ground where he was screaming in agony, where it was a pretty good picture, but you kind of feel uneasy about promoting it just because of the situation. There's one interesting one where he is on the ground grabbing his knee, and then Gaethje is just celebrating in the foreground, and he's in the background. And it's I think it's a pretty awesome image just for the fact that he caught both at the same time. And then, the little bit of between Gaethje and High going back and forth, that was nice to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll take a second here to just give props to Ryan Loco. I wish that I could do anything as well as Ryan Loco takes pictures. That dude is a stud. One of the smartest things the World Series of Fighting ever did was have him take their pictures because he is an absolute stud and a pro. Like, I've watched this guy work. He does this thing, and I'm sure all photographers do it, but it's pretty legit. So he's taking his photos, and he has it to where he can send them to his laptop, and he has a girl with him. So he takes a picture, he looks over at her, she gives him a thumbs up, it's a good shot, and he moves on. Like, that was pretty, like, I don't know the ins and outs of photography. I was just pretty impressed by that. And I'm super impressed by the way he takes pictures. So props to Ryan Loco for that picture and all the others he's taken. So there was no executive action this week that I could see. So let's move on to this Gaethje charity story, and then we'll get out of here with one kind of parting shot for both of us.
Sure. I just wanted to bring it up because I was kind of the one who sort of wrote the article that's been floating around there a little bit. So I just kind of want to give it a little extra press in case anybody hasn't read it yet. the story is, so Gaethje's from Stafford, Arizona. Everyone knows that. So at a local CrossFit gym in Stafford, where his mom goes to, there's a gym member. I believe it's her nephew, if I remember the story correctly. This lady that goes there. Her nephew is 6 months old now, and he's been battling cancer since, I believe, they diagnosed him when he was 4 months with AML, which is something medical terms, but basically it's a kind of leukemia as far as cancer goes. So it's attacking his immune system. So the guy, one of the co-owners, asked Gaethje's mom, "Hey, do you think Justin will be able to, sign a shirt and send it down because we're having a raffle for one of our events over the weekend?" And Gaethje didn't send the shirt. He sent the signed pair of gloves and sent those down, along with, I believe, a poster that he signed as well. So that was pretty cool. We picked up on it, and then I ended up talking to the guy down at the gym, getting some details. It's a pretty heartbreaking story, but I mean, if you see any of the videos that are on the blog or on the Twitter account that's associated with it, you can't help but smile just because the kid is so damn cute. And the things that he does from videos and what they said about, doing push-ups and crunches while waiting in the waiting room, for all his lab tests. It's kind of, refreshing to see that, to be able to work on something where it actually means something, whereas, not trying to grab some headlines and clicks. It's something that means something to a lot of people. The owners of the gym have been very nice with their gratitude and saying thank you, thank you, thank you. And then also the World Series of Fighting is sending down, I don't have the list on top of my head, but they're sending down a good handful of signed gloves by Ray, Carlos, I think Chael is signing some. All of the participants in the lightweight tournament from World Series of 25 are sending down their signed gloves, a couple posters, just to help raise money for the raffle. So I just wanted to point it out that it's a pretty touching story that a guy who was at the level that Justin's at would still be able to help out the people in his hometown. And I mean, who can't say no to helping out a little kid?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you and I were talking a little bit off air about, some of the things that we take personally, or I take personally. You're much better at handling this stuff than I am. You're much more emotionally developed than I am, Kyle. Congrats for that. So, but no, the point is that, when you meet some of these guys and you work with them and you realize they're good dudes, and not that there aren't other good dudes in MMA. I'm not saying that World Series of Fighting has the monopoly on good dudes, but when you meet these guys and you're like, for the most part, all they want to do is put on good fights and, and run a good promotion and have fun, and there's not a lot of deviousness that I've seen. Maybe I'm not looking hard enough, but, and you see stuff like this, you're like, you want to sort of vie for the guys and fend for them a little bit. And I think that Justin Gaethje is a really good dude. If you get to know him and you get to meet him, he's a hell of a fighter. He gets in there and he bangs it out, but he's a good guy as well. So I think that he is a perfect example of what there's a lot of in the promotion. Marlon Moraes, David Branch. And I don't want to short anybody by not saying their name, but I'm saying the guys that I've dealt with on a larger level are these guys. They've all been great dudes, and this is not by any means a departure from who Justin Gaethje is. It is 100% not a PR move because it existed before we picked up on it. So that's to me even more of a testimony to who he is.
Yeah, and Justin said when I was talking to him about it, he usually always gives his gloves away. I think he said for the last 7 fights he's given them away, usually to charities or something that helps out veterans. So, I mean, it's not the first time he's done it by any means. And he went to college and graduated with a human services degree. So helping people is kind of what other passion. So when I found that about him, I'm like, oh, so you like punching people in the face, but then you want to help them afterwards.
Exactly. He likes to help everybody except for the guy that's standing across the cage room. And you know what? He helps him too. He helps him figure out that maybe he shouldn't be fighting Justin Gaethje. So, all right, let's do this. I used to do this in my old podcast, so we'll do it in this one. I called it Finish Strong. Let's go ahead and I'll let you have the first one. I'll take the second one. Obviously, World Series of Fighting related. Just give me one thing that's standing out to you, something coming up, something that just happened. Go ahead and finish strong.
Yeah, so if we're moving on past that, I think everyone should start paying attention to the World Series Fighting 30 card. I mean, it doesn't get much more stacked than that in terms of title fights, We got 2 title fights with David Branch defending against Clifford Starks, and we got John Fitch fighting Zeffirino. So, I mean, 2 title fights, what's not to like about that? And hopefully we'll have some more content coming out previewing those pieces. And then, of course, we got Vinny versus Jake. So that one's going to be a good fight. And those 2 guys love to talk, so I'm sure we'll get some good quotes out of those 2 to help you guys get prepared for that.
Absolutely. I'm super excited about that fight. I'll be there, so I can't wait. What do you got going on, man? What do you got in the hopper? Tell me what you got coming down the pike.
Just working on a couple interviews, trying to set some stuff up. There was a series that we were trying to start a couple weeks ago, but it didn't come to fruition due to some bad audio files. But we're going to start doing a series with Stitch, having him telling some old fight stories, stuff from his perspective, because it's not a perspective we normally get. Just have him, just shoot the shit for a little bit, put it in Word, maybe get some audio in there. But it's definitely something to pay attention to down the road, because I think it's going to be pretty worthwhile content of reading.
That's gonna be fantastic. I can tell already. And the reason why I say that is because there's a couple guys that are out there sort of in the weeds. Stitch, Burt Watson, Pat Miletich to an extent. Certain guys who have sort of done it all, seen it all, and if they're presented in the right way, and it sounds like that's what you're about to do, that could be some really compelling stuff. And I think that sometimes we like to forget about the past, but everything now is so regulated and so processed and so filtered that back in the day, man, it was the wild, wild west, and that's the stuff that's cool. Stitch probably has stories of guys going in there probably when they shouldn't have, and that's the compelling stuff. So it's
like the Pride story with Coleman and Shootbox pretty much throwing down in the back room after one of the fights. Wasn't that the story?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the stuff. That's the stuff that we're gonna want. And Stitch was probably a fly on the wall for a lot of stuff. So, all right, guys, that does it for this inaugural edition of This Week in World Series of Fighting. We're going to try and do it every week. We're going to try and get guys to come on with us, or at least have interviews with World Series of Fighting relevant folks, Ray Sefo, Carlos Silva, whoever we can get that we feel is relevant to that week in the World Series of Fighting, and we'll bring it to you each week. So for John Franklin, or for Kyle Sims, this is John Franklin. You guys have a great time. Definitely check out World Series of Fighting 30. Check out Kyle. That's his Twitter right there, @KSims88. It is SYMES. Do not make the mistake of calling him Symes. He won't stand for it. So you can follow me at the Hot Cage Daily, and check all our stuff out, obviously always at the Combat Press. All right, guys, we'll check you next week. Have a great week.